My stepson told me he had a work meeting over my retirement weekend, so I spent alone. 5 days later, I learned he'd taken his girlfriend on a romantic getaway instead, and paid for it with the retirement money he quietly lifted from my pocket. When I asked him about it, he laughed while I stood there shaking, then said I never deserved a gift anyway. That at least she knew how to keep a man happy. I didn't say a word. The next morning, my phone lit up with 30 missed calls. Before I tell you how it all unraveled and why those calls came flooding in, do me a small favor. Tap subscribe and leave a comment saying where you're watching from. It helps stories like mine reach people who need to hear them. I'm 65 years old. My name is Frank Holloway, and until recently I believed I'd done at least one thing right in my life: raising my stepson as my own. Evan came into my world when he was a teenager, angry, grieving, carrying the weight of losing his father early. His mother, Margaret, and I married not long after. We didn't rush anything. We blended slowly, carefully. For 18 years, I showed up, ball games, parent-teacher meetings, late-night talks when he pretended he didn't need them. I paid for braces, textbooks, first cars that rattle like tin cans. I was there when he graduated, when he stumbled, when he stood back up, when Margaret passed after a short, brutal illness. It was Evan and me standing side by side at the graveside, promising we'd look out for each other. Maybe that's why I didn't question him when he told me he couldn't be around for my retirement weekend. I'd worked at Harrison Tool and Dye my entire adult life. 42 years of early mornings, steel-toed boots, and the steady hum of machines. I didn't ask for much, never did. When the company threw me a modest retirement send-off and handed me an envelope, cash, gift cards, a handwritten note from my crew, I tucked it into the inside pocket of my jacket. Old habit. My father used to say if you didn't keep your money close, it would grow legs and walk off. The plan was simple. Evan would come by Saturday. We'd grill, maybe crack open a decent bottle of bourbon I'd been saving. Nothing fancy. Just time. Family. That was the gift I wanted. On Wednesday, Evan called me. He sounded rushed, breath clipped, like he was already halfway out the door. "Frank, I hate this timing," he said. "Northbridge is dumping a last-minute work meeting on me. Mandatory. All hands. Out of town." I remember asking where. "Vermont," he said without missing a beat. "Ashwood Springs area. 2 nights, maybe 3. I felt the disappointment hit, sharp but quiet. At my age, you learn to swallow those moments. "Well," I said, keeping my voice even, "work is work. We'll do our thing when you're back." He sighed, laid it on thick. "I owe you big time. I'll make it up to you, I promise." He came by that evening to pack. I noticed the way he moved through the house like a guest instead of a son, opening drawers without asking, checking his phone every few minutes. He threw in slacks, button-downs, his laptop, even a blazer I hadn't seen him wear in years. I offered him my old travel charger. He took it without looking at me. Before he left, he gave me a quick hug, stiff as plywood. "Happy retirement," he said. That weekend stretched longer than I expected. Saturday morning, I made coffee for 2 out of habit, then poured the second cup down the sink. I grilled anyway, wrapped the leftovers, ate alone at the table where Margaret and I used to sit. I watched old westerns, took a long walk through Maple Ridge Estates, nodded at neighbors who didn't know what to say. Sunday passed the same way. By Monday, I was tired and the way sleep doesn't fix. Evan came back late Monday night. He brought me a box of chocolates and a bottle of wine with a glossy label. Souvenir stuff. From a meeting, he said, setting them on the counter. He talked about breakout sessions and team exercises, about bad hotel coffee and long days. He sounded practiced, like someone reading from notes they'd memorized. I wanted to believe him. God help me, I did. 5 days later, everything cracked. It started with a call from Susan Miller, an old friend who worked at my bank. She didn't say much on the phone, just asked if we could talk in person about an account clarification. Her tone had that careful edge professionals use when they don't want to alarm you. At the branch, she slid a printout across the desk. A withdrawal. Large. Unusual. Dated the Friday of my retirement weekend. It wasn't labeled clearly, just a lump sum pulled from a joint account Evan had access to for emergencies. I felt my stomach drop. Then I checked my jacket pocket. The envelope was gone. I went home, hands trembling now, and tore the house apart. Nothing. I called Evan, straight to voicemail. I left a message I barely remember recording. Calm words over a racing heart. That night, sleep didn't come. Instead, pieces began fitting together in ways I didn't want to see. The blazer, the charger, the rehearsed stories. The next morning, I called Silver Pine Retreat in Ashwood Springs. I told them I needed documentation for reimbursement. Old man confusion, I said, chuckling like it was all a harmless mix-up. The woman on the line was polite, efficient. She found the reservation quickly. Evan's name. Romantic package for 2. 4 nights. Paid partly in cash, partly on a card. I thanked her and hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that, staring at the grain in the wood, hearing Margaret's voice in my head telling me to breathe. When Evan finally came home that evening, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam doors. I showed him the paperwork, laid it out neatly, and asked one simple question. Where's my retirement money? He went pale. Then his jaw tightened. And then he laughed. That sound is something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. He said I was overreacting, that I didn't need all that money anyway, that Lena understood him in ways I never could. He said I should be grateful he even bothered to tell me anything at all. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just turned and walked down the hall to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed until my legs stopped shaking. The next morning, my phone exploded with missed calls, 30 of them, and that was only the beginning. I didn't answer a single one of those calls. Not the first 30 that buzzed my phone raw while I stood in the shower staring at the tile, and not the dozen more that followed through the morning. I let the phone sit face down on the kitchen counter like it was something dangerous, something that might bite if I picked it up too fast. At 65, you'd think I'd be better at handling shock. You'd be wrong. Betrayal doesn't soften with age. It just cuts deeper because there's more history behind it. Evan didn't come home that night. I figured he went straight to Lena's place, or maybe holed up somewhere convincing himself he was the wrong party. I slept poorly, drifting in and out, replaying moments from the past 18 years, and wondering which ones were real, and which ones were just performances I'd been too trusting to question. The next day, I did something I should have done sooner. I sat down at the desk in Margaret's old study, pulled out every folder I'd ever labeled important, and started going through them one by one. Bank statements, insurance paperwork, account access forms, anything with Evan's name on it. Susan was right. It hadn't just been one withdrawal. There were others, smaller amounts, spaced out over months, always just under the kind of number that would trigger an automatic alert. Grocery labels that didn't match our receipts. Travel charges that lined up with work trips I'd never thought twice about. A pattern so careful it felt rehearsed. Practice. By noon, my hands were shaking again. But this time it wasn't just grief. It was anger, slow, steady, and heavy. That afternoon, my brother-in-law Thomas stopped by, Margaret's younger brother. He'd been checking in on me more since she passed, showing up with casseroles and awkward hugs, trying to fill space that couldn't be filled. He took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. I told him everything. He didn't interrupt, didn't soften it. When I finished, he exhaled slowly and said, "Frank, you need to protect yourself. Now." He offered me the Lakeshore duplex, an old rental he was fixing up. "It's empty," he said. "No pressure. Stay as long as you need." That night, Evan finally came back. He walked in like nothing had changed, tossed his keys on the counter, and started talking about dinner. I cut him off. "Sit down," I said. He rolled his eyes, but did it. I laid out what I found. The withdrawals, the missing cash, the resort confirmation. I didn't accuse him of anything I couldn't prove. I watched his face shift through irritation, defensiveness, and finally something colder. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is," he said. "I needed the money." "For what?" I asked. He shrugged. "Life. That's when I told him I knew about Lena. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said, "She makes me happy. You wouldn't understand." I felt something snap then, not loudly, not dramatically, just a clean break, like a rope finally giving way after years of strain. I told him I was leaving for a while. He scoffed, said I was being dramatic, said I'd regret it. I packed a bag anyway. Clothes, documents, Margaret's watch. Before I walked out, I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You stole from me, not just money, everything else too." He laughed again. That laugh followed me all the way to the duplex. The next 2 weeks blurred together. I opened a new bank account at a different institution, changed passwords, set alerts. Susan helped me quietly flag suspicious transactions. I booked a consultation with a lawyer, Daniel Price, recommended by a friend of Thomas's. Calm man, sharp eyes. He listened without judgment and told me exactly what I needed to do. Document everything. Don't confront Evan again without counsel, and above all, don't leave the paper trail incomplete. Evan's messages shifted tones daily. 1 hour was anger. How dare I abandon him? How ungrateful I was. The next, apologies. Promises. Offers to talk it out. I didn't respond. Then came the love bombing. Flowers delivered to the duplex. Emails about family therapy. A long voicemail where he cried and said he was lost. I deleted it without finishing. What finally confirmed everything for me happened on a Wednesday evening. I'd gone back to the house to collect a few more things while Evan was supposedly at work. As I stepped inside, I heard his voice from the kitchen. He was on the phone, speaking softly. "She needs space," he said. "I've got it under control. Once this settles, we'll figure things out." I didn't announce myself. I didn't confront him. I just turned around and left. That night, Daniel filed the initial paperwork. 3 days later, Evan made his biggest mistake. He ordered a luxury watch online, ridiculously expensive, and charged it to the joint account. Claimed later it was for professional appearances. The delivery came on a day I'd swapped schedules last minute. I was there when the courier knocked. I signed for it, opened the box, admired it briefly. Then I drove straight to the retailer. The return was clean, legal, documented. The refund hit the account within the hour. I transferred my share immediately. Evan didn't notice right away. He was too busy pretending he still had control. By the time he realized what I'd done, it was already too late. And that's when the real fallout began. By the time Evan realized the watch money was gone, I was already several steps ahead of him. He called me that night. Once, twice, then over and over until the phone finally went silent. I didn't answer. I already knew what he'd say, that I'd crossed a line, that I was being spiteful, that I was ruining his life. Funny how people like him never notice the line they cross first. The next morning, Daniel called me early. "He's reached out," he said calmly, angry, confused, claiming you're acting irrationally. I laughed for the first time in weeks. It came out rough, surprised even me. "Let him," I said. Daniel explained that Evan had contacted his own attorney and was trying to frame this as me abandoning the family home and mishandling shared assets. It was textbook, predictable, almost boring, if it hadn't been my life. "What he doesn't know," Daniel continued, "is how thorough you've been." And I had been thorough. I had spreadsheets now, dates, amounts, descriptions. Copies of resort confirmations, bank statements, screenshots of messages Evan never meant for me to see. I'd even written down verbatim the things he'd said that night, the laugh, the words about me not deserving anything. Daniel told me judges care about patterns more than drama, and Evan had given us a beautiful, ugly pattern. About a week later, I got my first message from Lena. It came from an unknown number. No greeting. Just, "I didn't know he took money from you." I swear, he told me it was his. I stared at the screen for a long time. The audacity of it didn't even sting anymore. I forwarded the message to Daniel without replying. Then she tried again the next day. Longer this time. She said Evan was spiraling, that he was stressed, that he'd made mistakes but wasn't a bad person. She asked if I consider talking to him for closure. Closure. Like this was some mutual misunderstanding. I blocked the number. Evan, meanwhile, escalated. He showed up at the duplex one evening, without warning. I saw his car pull in and felt my chest tighten. Not fear exactly, but something close. He knocked hard, impatient. I didn't open the door. "Frank," he shouted, "we need to talk." I stood on the other side, heart pounding, and said nothing. After a few minutes, he left. Daniel told me later that was the right call. "Let him dig," he said. "Every outburst helps us." 2 days after that, Daniel called again. His tone was different, sharper. "Evan withdrew a significant amount from the joint savings," he said. "How much?" $38,000. Even though I'd moved most of my share already, hearing the number felt like being punched. Another violation. Another reminder that Evan saw my life savings as something he could grab whenever he felt cornered. Daniel acted fast. Emergency motions, asset freeze requests, temporary financial orders. A court date set within the week. That's when Evan's attitude changed overnight. His lawyer reached out to Daniel with a proposal. No court, no drawn-out fight. Evan would agree to a clean division, mostly on my terms, if I agreed to keep the reasons for separation private. No detailed filings. No specific allegations. Daniel explained what that meant without saying it outright. Evan was scared, not of me, but of what the truth could cost him. That night, I finally got the answer to why. Another message from Lena, again from a different number. This one was frantic. "Please," she wrote. His job found out. Not everything, but enough. If this gets worse, he could lose everything. I know you hate me, but don't ruin his career. There it was. Evan worked in consulting. Reputation mattered. The company had strict policies about personal conduct, especially where finances and ethics overlapped. A formal record citing misuse of funds and an inappropriate relationship tied to company travel, even indirectly, could destroy him professionally. For the first time since all this started, I felt something close to satisfaction. I told Daniel I'd agreed to a settlement, with one condition. Evan would cover the majority of legal fees. Not just his. Mine too. Negotiations dragged on for days. Percentages adjusted. Language refined. Eventually, we landed at 80%. When the agreement was drafted, I slept through the night for the first time in over a month. That peace didn't last long. A few mornings later, while I was standing in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Sender, Evan's company. Legal department. They were conducting an internal review, the email said. Evan had claimed I was spreading false allegations about him at work. They wanted confirmation. Were the claims of infidelity and financial misconduct true? My hands shook as I read it. Not panic. Focus. I forwarded the email to Daniel immediately. We responded together that afternoon. Short. Factual. No emotion. We confirmed that I had filed formal paperwork citing documented infidelity and financial misuse. Attached redacted evidence. Just enough. An hour later, I received an automatic out-of-office reply. I didn't hear anything else from the company after that. Evan, on the other hand, went quiet. No calls. No texts. No surprise visits. Then, one evening, Thomas called me. He sounded tired. He tried staying with me, he said. Didn't last. Apparently, Evan had shown up at Thomas's place unannounced, ranting about betrayal and unfairness. Thomas told him plainly that he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Evan left furious. That night, I sat alone in the duplex and realized something strange. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I was done. The court date came and went without drama. Papers signed. Assets divided. Evan kept the house but had to refinance and pay me out. I kept my retirement accounts intact. The legal fees arrangement held. On the courthouse steps afterward, Evan asked through his lawyer if we could talk for 5 minutes. Against Daniel's advice, I agreed on the condition we stay inside with security nearby. He looked smaller than I remembered. Tired. He told me he knew he'd messed up, that he hoped someday we could speak again. I told him I wished him a future that didn't involve me. And I meant it. When I walked out of that building, the air felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because I was finally moving forward. What I didn't know yet was that the quiet wouldn't last, because the fallout had one more chapter to write. The quiet after the courthouse didn't feel like peace at first. It felt hollow, like the moment after a storm passes, and you step outside half expecting the sky to crack open again. I went back to the lakeshore duplex that afternoon, sat on the bare couch Thomas had lent me, and stared at the wall until the sun dipped low enough to throw long shadows across the floor. For the first time in weeks, no one needed anything from me. That night, I turned my phone off and slept. Not the restless half-sleep I'd been stuck in since the betrayal, but real sleep. Deep, dreamless. The kind that leaves your body sore in the morning because it's been relaxed for the first time in too long. The next few days passed quietly. Paperwork. Emails with Daniel confirming everything was finalized. Calls with utility companies. Small, practical steps that felt oddly grounding. Each task checked off was another thread tying me to a life that was mine again. Evan didn't contact me directly after that courthouse meeting. I think he understood, finally, that there was nothing left to say. Or maybe his lawyer explained it in terms he could understand. Any further contact would only make things worse for him. Either way, the silence held. Lena didn't stay silent. She cycled through numbers like they were disposable. Texts at first, long paragraphs about regret, about being manipulated, about how she'd lost everything too. Then voicemails, crying, apologies that never quite crossed the line into accountability. Each message followed the same pattern. Start with sorrow, end with self-pity. I didn't respond to any of them. I learned through Thomas that she'd been couch hopping, burning bridges as fast as she made them. People eventually get tired of being someone else's emotional dumping ground. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. Just confirmation. Consequences tend to arrive whether we invite them or not. A few weeks later, I finally met with Margaret's parents. They were older now, moving slower, their faces etched with lines I hadn't noticed before. They hugged me like I was still family. Because to them, we talked carefully around Evan, naming facts without reliving details. They were heartbroken. Not surprised. They admitted quietly, but heartbroken all the same. I went home afterward and cried for the first time since everything ended. Not for Evan, for Margaret, for the future we'd imagined, the quiet retirement we planned together, the idea that family was supposed to hold when the world let go. Life didn't magically get better after that, but it got steadier. I found a small apartment not far from the river. 1 bedroom, plenty of light, a balcony just big enough for a chair and a potted plant. I furnished it slowly, secondhand pieces. A bookshelf I put together myself, Margaret's old reading chair in the corner. I took my time choosing what came into that space. Nothing rushed, nothing that didn't feel right. I started cooking again. Actual meals. Soups that simmered all afternoon. Bread that filled the place with warmth. I signed up for a gym, not to impress anyone, just to remind my body it was still capable. Some mornings, I walked the trail by the river and let the air clear my head. People asked questions. Co-workers from the old days. Neighbors. Friends who'd heard pieces of the story through the grapevine. I told them as much as they needed to know and no more. I wasn't interested in turning my pain into a spectacle. One afternoon, I ran into Evan by accident at a hardware store. We froze when we saw each other, like two strangers caught mid-step. He looked thinner, tired. We nodded politely. Nothing more. Later, at checkout, the cashier told me someone ahead had paid for my items. I didn't need to ask who. I drove straight to a shelter and donated the same amount. I didn't want anything from him. Not money, not gestures, not guilt disguised as generosity. Months passed. Seasons shifted. I took a solo trip to the coast in late spring. Rented a small cabin. Woke up to the sound of waves. Sat on the porch with coffee and no agenda. For the first time since Margaret died, I felt something close to contentment. Not happiness, not yet, but calm. I deleted old photos from my phone. Not all at once. Just a few each night. I kept the ones that mattered, the real moments, the ones that still made sense. The rest I let go. I don't know what Evan's life looks like now. I hear fragments now and then. He changed jobs, downsized, keeps to himself. Maybe he learned something from all this. Maybe not. That part isn't mine to manage anymore. What I do know is this. Betrayal doesn't just break trust. It rearranges your understanding of the past. It forces you to re-examine moments you thought were solid and see the cracks you missed. That process hurts. But on the other side of it, there's clarity. I don't regret raising Evan. I regret trusting him after he showed me who he'd become. There's a difference. If you're listening to this and you're in the middle of something similar, someone you loved, someone you built your life around, choosing themselves at your expense. Hear me when I say this. You're not weak for being blindsided. You're not foolish for believing in family. But you are responsible for what you do once the truth is in front of you. Walking away doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes it means you finally succeeded at protecting yourself. And before I go, if this story resonated with you, if you've lived through betrayal, loss, or the quiet strength it takes to start over, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Your support helps stories like mine reach others who might need to hear them. Thank you for listening.